So good morning and a very warm greeting from the Cove and Harbour Chamber Cruise Industry Workshop, which is sponsored by the Port of Cork. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joanna Murphy. I'm president of the Cove and Harbour Chamber. So this morning we're going to focus on the safe return of the cruise industry. The cruise industry has developed nicely over the years, and Cove has become one of the main tourist attractions that the passengers and crew enjoy on their stay. So here's a short video, thanks to the Port of Cork for providing. So enjoy. So thank you to the Port of Cork for that lovely video. I think you're all probably doing a jig as we were listening to it. So I just encourage you to all use the chat function there so that you can ask questions throughout the session. And we're going to be recording the session here this morning, which will be available on our website then during the week. So hopefully we'll get a chance to the questions, but we have a lot to get through this morning, and it's really important that you all get the information that you need. So there's so much to see and do in Cork and these brief visits, and there's plenty of tourism activity on offer, but of course we have a very special place in our hearts here this morning for our own town, Cove. And we want to see the local businesses benefit from this important revenue stream when it comes back into our harbour next year, hopefully April. So you've just seen Belfast welcome its first cruise ship in well over a year. So by next April, hopefully Cove and Cork will be ready, willing and able for the activity that comes with the cruise line industry. For now, we can only look forward to and ready ourselves for the super summer of 2022. And this morning, we're so lucky to have 5 fantastic expert speakers, including Captain Michael McCarthy, who is Chair of Cruise Europe. We have Seamus Heaney here from the head of Pure Cork, Jackie Coakley from Cove Tourism, Niamh McCarthy, who's MD of Excursions Ireland, and Conor Mould, Chief Commercial Officer of the Port of Cork, who are also our sponsors here this morning. So I'll hand you over to Conor, who will kick off this morning and give us a cruise tourism update. But first, a bit of a background about Conor. Conor is the Chief Commercial Officer of the Port of Cork Company, responsible for the development and implementation of the port's commercial strategy, including its integrated business development, marketing and public relations plan. So over to you, Conor. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for your very kind introduction. That certainly made me feel important for a few seconds anyway, not if any of it's real. Good morning, everybody. We're delighted to be the sponsors again of this event. We've had an opportunity to sponsor the breakfast series for the entire year, and it's hugely important to the Port of Cork, as is our presence and contribution to Cove. What I'd like to do this morning is, over the 8 minutes I've been allotted, is share with you a very brief overview of the industry, the perspective of where things are going to go, and more importantly, the efforts that we, the Port of Cork, will make in ensuring we see a safe return to cruise, and ensure that we bring back that contribution to Cove and indeed the greater Cork economy that we've enjoyed for so many years. So if you bear with me, I'm going to share my screen and the presentation, and we'll walk through that, and I promise I'll be as quick and succinct as possible, opening the way for the other speakers who are going to make a very significant contribution this morning. So you might just, I presume everyone can see that, can we? Good. So in terms of current status, maybe just to put into perspective where we are at the moment. Pre-COVID, the Port of Cork had 100 cruise calls booked. And that impact of COVID meant that we only had one of those calls made in 2019. From the Port of Cork's perspective, that's a significant loss of revenue in the realms of about €4 million. And for a company of our size, that's huge, nearly 10% of our revenue turnover. In terms of the impact on Cove and indeed Cork from a financial perspective, you're talking anywhere in the realms of a loss of 14 to 17 million because to businesses, because the passengers themselves spend in excess of €80 per passenger. The crew themselves spend in the region 25 to 30 euros per passenger. So this business is hugely important to the business in the region, and that impact has been felt really across the board. Certainly we believe, and I think Joanne had mentioned it in open speeches, and we're confident that we'll see a return to cruise in 2022, starting in April. And certainly they're the indicators that we have from the Irish Department of Transport, who we work with regularly. And what you'll see when it comes back is probably a very different cruise industry, and my fellow panelists will be able to comment on that, particularly Michael and from the broad European perspective, and Niamh, who from the excursions perspective, who's also dealing, as I'm sure she'll expand, with Belfast and their return and the other returns around the British Isles. But it will be very different. Onboard changes will be driven by new technology, and that will see changes in muster drills and probably significantly lower occupancy on the passenger side. We'll see changes in embarkation and isolation, all of which are very challenging for the cruise lines and the shore support services to deal with, but they're all geared towards a safer return to cruise and ensuring that we can deal in a manner that instills confidence both in the passengers and the crew, but also in the receiving communities like Cove. For our part, Port of Cork, we continue to market overseas, and you can see in the top corner there one of our more innovative marketing tools. Being from Dublin, I found it very hard to sign off on this particular advertisement, but I've been here for 12 years now, and I've come to accept that there's Port of Cork. The Cork is a very different part to the rest of the country, but certainly from our perspective, we've pushed hard to promote Cove and Cork, and indeed Bantry, as a destination of choice with the cruise industry, and we will continue to do so. In terms of what's happening around the rest of Europe, we have seen a staggered return to cruise, and as I said, Mick and Niamh will expand more on this as they're at the forefront of dealing with it. But we have seen safe return of cruise in Europe in particular. We've seen the mixed return in the British Isles, so certainly in England and Wales and in Northern Ireland, we've seen returns of cruise initially on blue cruises, but we've now seen a move towards shore excursions, controlled shore excursions, which is welcomed. Scotland somewhat behind, and as I think we're seeing an aspect of the devolved parliaments making different decisions in terms of the United Kingdom, but certainly we've seen successful return of cruise to varying different degrees. For us, for the Port of Cork, we are currently in the chair of Cruise Ireland, and so on a monthly basis, we are engaging with the Cruise Britain, Cruise Wales, Cruise Scotland, indeed to ensure that we're up to speed with how things are progressing in those jurisdictions, to ensure that we're not out of step and that we're fully informed. And more importantly, to ensure that they're informed, because the British Isles, British and Irish Isles, are a destination particularly for the US passengers who, as we know, predominantly drive the cruise industry and its move in this part of the world. And finally, maybe in terms of some next steps, and again, this will pave the way for my fellow panelists to expand in their areas. We've been working on return protocols, and we've done this in line with industry best practices. And we've had some experience in this. Don't forget, We also run passenger ferries, which, while slightly different in terms of the passenger piece in particular, follow the requirements for the safe returns. And so working with our colleagues in the British Isles group, which I've mentioned, we are looking at safe return protocols to ensure that we instill confidence in the returning communities. We continue to monitor what's happening globally, because this is fast changing, and I think we're all aware that the introduction of new variants can change things quite rapidly. But that said, we continue to monitor things as they go. There's a hugely important job to be done between the communication between the ports themselves and the cruise lines. And we are bridging that gap, and we're putting extra resources into ensuring that we're very much on the same page as the cruise lines themselves, as they develop their safe return protocols, which can be different for each line, and we ensure that they are married to our safe return protocols. Engaging with local communities like we are today is hugely important to us. The confidence piece is important. Tourism and excursion operators like Neve and Excursions Ireland, who are at the forefront of this to ensure that we're on the same page. That's all absolutely essential to ensure that we deliver a safe return in 2022. And for us, to give you all the reassurance, Cove is Ireland's dedicated cruise berth. It's the Port of Cork's dedicated cruise berth, and it's the centre point of our marketing drive and business development drive to ensure we see a robust return to cruising in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor. Definitely some challenges there. It's great to see that Cove and Cork is being kept in the minds of the cruise industry. So thank you, Conor. So now over to our next speaker, Captain Michael McCarthy. Captain Michael McCarthy is the current chairman of Cruise Europe and the former commercial manager of the Port of Cork. He is very involved in the EU cruise initiatives and with the offshore floating wind sector. So over to you now, Mick. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, colleagues. Conor, you'll always be welcome in Cork, and you'll be particularly welcome in Cove, I'm sure. So, you know, I wouldn't worry about that. Okay, Cruise Europe. Basically, Cruise Europe was founded 30 years ago, and it was founded to bring the cruise ships from America into Northern Europe, because if the ships aren't in Northern Europe, they're not going to be in Ireland or under the other countries. So following that, next slide, so following that, it's been growing. We now have 145 member ports, from Lisbon right up to St. Petersburg, right out as far as Iceland, and everywhere in between, obviously UK and Ireland, and right out then into the Baltic, Norway, Sweden, Denmark. 145 members. I've been chair since 2012. I was elected for a 4-year term, and you can see 4 years can extend very quickly over a longer period. And particularly, I suppose, as COVID hit, we were due to have our AGM last March, and again this March, but obviously that's been put out to next February. So we have Irish members of Cork, Belfast, Galway, Shannon Foynes. Then we have associate members like Neve and Excursions Ireland, and Hamilton Shipping based also here in Cove. COVID-19 has forced us all to adapt, whereas the role of Cruise Europe is to bring the ports and the cruise executives together. And we do that by organising seminars, organising talks, organising events, and being the liaison, particularly for smaller ports that wouldn't have a budget for massive marketing. So smaller ports benefit probably better, more than bigger ports by bringing these people together, particularly at the trade shows, which happen in Miami and happen in Hamburg and in the Mediterranean. So the top issues for all of us following the pandemic, and when we get back to cruising next year in Ireland, the same issues are going to be there. Itinerary planning. We've been working very closely on the procedures and protocols, and Neve will cover that in relation to what her experience in Belfast, port infrastructure, and environmental issues. Next slide. So obviously it brought the cruise industry to its knees, the pandemic. The ports, and as Conor outlined, and the travel industry in general has suffered a loss of enormous revenues, but this loss is nothing compared to the loss to the cruise industry themselves. It's in billions and billions. It has forced some cruise companies into liquidation. We lost Cruise and Maritime Voyages, which were a huge supporter of Irish tours and Irish ports. It has forced many of the major cruise lines into delays in new ships, but also recycling of older ships and taking old tonnage out of the market. So we will definitely see newer ships into the future, but what are those ships going to look like? What size are they going to be, for example? So we've been working over the last 18 months with the EU and with the cruise lines to develop the return to cruising protocols. And again, Niamh will cover that. So many national governments are very active in recognizing the value of cruise tourism. Unfortunately, our Irish government does not recognize the value of cruise tourism. Unless there's a bed night involved, and unless there's, restaurants and hotels and a lot of activity around that, Fáilte Ireland and others are quite reluctant to get deeply involved in the cruise industry. So we need more of a joint collaboration between the ports, regulatory authorities in the UK. The EU is very, very supportive, and we hope that following the pandemic, Fáilte Ireland and others will equally come on board and recognise the value of the cruise industry. The situation in Europe that we're dealing with at the moment, this is just a breakout of what's happening in the various ports. The Irish government has closed the Irish ports, as Conor said, until 2022. The UK are back cruising since June around the UK. Scotland will return next Monday. So Northern Ireland obviously is welcoming cruise ships. I think Niamh again will have 60 or 70 ships this year. The Netherlands at the end of July are expected back. Belgium, the French Atlantic ports, Spain. An interesting one is that the Canary Islands has been operating right throughout the pandemic, and TUI Cruises and AIDA are operating in that region and in some regions of the Mediterranean. So it just has proved that with proper protocols that the cruise industry can be safe. Denmark, Norway, the Baltic have recommenced. Iceland is back as well. So just to give some figures, and this is only going to confirm to you, Conor, that the figures that you put up. So we have to ask ourselves the primary reason why people visit Ireland. Obviously, it's a nice place to visit, but it's to embrace our culture, our ancestry, and specific tourist attractions. Cove is a very, very important stop for the cruise industry. And the average spend throughout Europe, and these are surveys that have been undertaken in France, Spain, Finland, and other places. This is an average, and when you use an average, it's very difficult at times. Turnaround passengers spend on average 196 euros plus hotels, etc. Ports of call across Europe and Ireland average 70 euro. Slightly different than what you said, Conor, but you can see where the averages come out. The biggest spenders are American, Canadian, Australian, British, and a growing factor that we need to consider for the future are Chinese, who actually love to shop. So the estimate total revenue from European ports for 100 cruise calls, and again, Conor, it falls into the figures that you said, in any year with 200,000 passengers and crew is an average of 16.5 million. Many surveys have been undertaken during the years, and a Red Sea poll, B&A polls, etc. And Cork is rated very highly and with very high satisfaction and recommendation scores. The look of the port is a key feature, and we're absolutely blessed with Cork in having probably one of the nicest entry ports in Europe, if not in the world. Satisfaction in arriving into Cork is very, very high. The cruise lines look at the expectations and people, their expectations of a visit versus their experience. And Cork has exceeded the expectations of all the passengers in comparison to, say, Dublin, where they have a very, very high expectation because they will have read a lot about Dublin, whereas their satisfaction can be less, whereas in Cork, they don't know the region so well. So obviously their experience far exceeds their expectations. So again, we said how much they spend, the crew is there, and it's also there what they spend it on: clothing, local crafts, food, beverage, other retail, taxis, ground transportation, etc. And finally, for me, the sustainability of the cruise industry post-pandemic, one issue has not gone away. The sustainability of all leisure activity has been brought sharply into focus. It's reawakened our appreciation of less crowded locations, outdoor activities, over-tourism, social distancing, and tourism's role in climate change. So sustainability is constantly in the news. We read about zero emissions, energy transition, carbon taxes, carbon capture, and onshore power, hydrogen fuels. These are all the issues that we in Cruise Europe are dealing with at the moment. So what will this mean for the future? We feel it's going to make a move from the very mega ships down to smaller ships that want to get into different areas. We feel that the very large mega ships may stay on areas, what they call the milk runs, maybe from Barcelona, maybe from Copenhagen, certainly from Miami, but smaller, more intimate type of cruising. And that's from ships maybe from 1,000 up to 2,500 passengers. But the cruise industry will prevail. The cruise industry has no option to be above compliant with all international regulations. We hear criticisms of emissions, noise, dirt, all of the issues, pumping effluent, pumping this. Of course, there are exceptions, but the ships themselves and the cruise industry, they're carrying passengers. Everybody has a mobile phone, so they have to be above international regulations in order to survive. So, opportunity Cork Harbour. There is a latent demand for international tourism and cruise tourism in particular. We have to tackle the old issues, which are still there, and they have not gone away. Communication, 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 and dealing with local communities is going to be paramount. We need to work with our colleagues in the cruise lines, as Conor said, and cruise tourism, never forget, it's an advertising opportunity for Cork City and the region. And it does attract back cruise passengers on land-based holidays. We need to remain positive, focus on what we can achieve, provide leadership, because full cruise ships will cruise again and Cork needs to be ready. So for me, it's a very positive message, I think, for Cove and for Europe in general. So thanks, colleagues.
Thanks, Michael, and great to get an insight into Cruise Europe. And you're so right, the cruise industry is really, really important to not just Cove, but the whole region. And you can see that on any day that you will come into Cove, be it a Monday or a Tuesday, and if a liner's in Cove, the place is just buzzing. So the economic revenue that the industry actually provides for any town, and as you said, will actually lure them back even for a holiday afterwards, is actually phenomenal. So it's great to get the numbers from both yourself and Connor regarding the revenue that it does generate. So now we're going to, so just don't remember, now we have a chat section there for you to put in your questions, and we'll endeavour to try and answer them. So now we're going to move on to our next speaker, which is Niamh McCarthy. Niamh is the CEO of Excursions Ireland, who has established themselves as the leading provider of ground services to international cruise lines visiting the island of Ireland. And Niamh is the founder member of Cruise Ireland, the cross-border marketing body for the cruise on the island of Ireland. Her company is also a member of the world leading ground operators. Excursions Ireland have won numerous awards, and Niamh has been the forefront of this success. So good morning, Niamh. You there?
Good morning, Jana. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you for inviting me along today. And good morning, everybody. I have, just to give you a little bit of background, I've just been asked to speak mainly about our operations which have recommenced in Belfast, just to give you an idea of how it's working out, what is required of us in order to operate under the new safe protocols for the return to service. So I'm going to spend most of my time talking about that, but I'll go through it as fast as I can because there's quite a lot of detail in the presentation. So just for those of you who don't know, it's just a little bit of our company background, over 30 years experience in incoming travel to Ireland. Prior to COVID, we handled over 400 calls across the island of Ireland in 2019. Our busiest ports there, Dublin, Belfast and Cove. We would be responsible for tour development and itineraries for our clients, as well as alongside the ports, introducing new ports of call, new tours, and trying to get ships to turn in the various ports in Ireland. That's just to name but a few. Again, just behind the scenes, I suppose to stress, cruise is a very competitive industry. The background work that goes on with us would be lots of bids and travel to meet new and existing clients, annual sales trips to Europe and the US. Normally the cruise contracts are typically 2 to 3 years. The margins are extremely tight and getting tighter, much more emphasis on price now and not always the loyalty for service. Growing restrictions from venues, I suppose that's a big issue. Well, it was. Where they were hitting capacity, and we were, I suppose, getting negative customer experience due to this overcrowding and queues. Growing demands and expectations from cruise clients, quite an inflexible industry at times, but also to remember that one of their main reasons for picking various regions is that shore excursions is one of the highest revenue earners on board. So they're a business, as we all know, they're doing very badly at the moment, but in normal circumstances, we need to remember that they are a huge business and they want to make money, and a lot of it. So they will go to the regions around the world where tours are popular with their guests, where people want to buy tours. And that's a huge factor in creating itineraries that sell for them. Behind the scenes, where are we? Yeah, working with the tourist attractions, as I just mentioned. This is just to give you a quick background. We are finding it pre-COVID much more difficult to work with venues due to overcrowding, and with cruise being such a last minute, I suppose, you know, final numbers aren't always given till 24 to 48 hours in advance. So sometimes we hit issues with not being able to get the times in port. We don't have a huge amount of flexibility because the ship has to sail. Constantly being asked for new tours, and I know people will say, oh, it's always the same tours all the time. When you're in Cork, it's always Blarney. When you're in Belfast, Giant's Causeway. We send them up to 40 tours, but ultimately they will choose the ones that sell, and they are obviously the big names. But we keep pushing all those new tours all the time. Then again, developing relationships with venues and local organisations. We've always had a great relationship with the port and the chamber and everybody in Cove. And it's actually quite admirable how you all work together, which isn't the case in other ports around Ireland. And making bookings, negotiating rates. Health and safety, this was pre-COVID, and we thought we were being fussy, but little did we know what was to come post-COVID. Just guests. Again, this is just generic information. You know, we constantly have to warn them about you know, getting off the coach on the other side of the road and looking the right way, that kind of thing. Uneven, slippy steps, the amount of accidents we have on tours, whether it's falling at the Giant's Causeway or Blarney Castle, this kind of thing. The guide setting a good example, asking them to wear their seatbelts, not walking when the coach is in motion. That was all we had to worry about pre-COVID. So now just to run through our operations in a COVID world, as I say, this is just Belfast, Northern Ireland at the moment that we are operating in. And again, this presentation, I kind of adapted. It was aimed towards our guides and our operations staff in Belfast. So it's basically what's required of them and us as their employer in order to be able to work in Belfast Harbour. So it's basically, you know, we don't have access to the terminal, have to follow certain restrictions when we arrive where we park. They have to all be tested, lateral flow test. Either they can do that at home remotely, and there's a central email where they have to send the negative tests through to, or on the pier. They have to fill out health questionnaires. They have an infrared temperature taking technology machine there as well. So all of this happens. So again, just prepping for a coach to leave on any given morning in Belfast, it takes longer than ever now. So we have guides and coaches sometimes reporting an hour and 15 minutes before their tour departure time. But look, that's just the new way of operating at the moment. So that's just on arrival at the port. All of the cruise line protocols, they have kind of amalgamated them, and CLIA, the Cruise Lines International Association, have been, I suppose, the governing body, and all the cruise lines fall underneath them. So we've received information from CLIA, but then ultimately we also receive information from the cruise lines who have additional protocols. So all the cruise lines are not the same. Some require lateral flow, some require, you know, the antigen. It's just different from cruise line to cruise line. So from our point of view, there has been a huge amount of work in the background, just trying to, I suppose, you know, to gather together the information that each cruise line needs on the day, and then what the next cruise line needs on the day. But obviously, these are the main ones. All guests and crew must be vaccinated, health checks prior to boarding, sanitization on board, which was always present on cruise lines, which has kind of been frustrating for me because they did get the raw end of the stick. But cruise lines have always, you've had to wash your hands, sanitize your hands before entering any of the food outlets. The same with coming on and off the ship. So that's always been there, but that's been ramped up. Mask wearing, then they have isolation units on board. I know Connor was talking about reduced capacity. So they will always have these going forward. So basically an area where they can isolate anybody who has any signs or ultimately is positive for COVID. And then all of the cruise lines have a response plan in conjunction with the local public health. So in Belfast, it's the Public Health Association up there, and also the Port Health. So then again, the EI COVID-19 protocols before your tour: temperature check, follow guidelines, read paperwork, stay in the bubble, maintain your distance, wear a mask at all times, maintain your distance when you're off the coach and on the coach, stay away from the guests at all time as much as possible. Reduce capacity at venues, so we can only fill the coaches in Northern Ireland at the moment to 24 seats, and we have a specific seating plan. Sanitize your hands, do not stand at the top of the aisle and address guests down the coach. So in other words, previously the guides would have stood at the top of the coach and spoke down. They can no longer do that. Again, that's just more during the tour, you know, no physical contact, the microphone. So we ask that the ship's escort doesn't use the microphone, wipe it down before use, all of these things, sanitize hands, remind the guests about sanitization. It's quite clinical at the moment, unfortunately, but again, it's a necessary evil in order to be able to do this and to have a positive outcome. Wearing a mask, maintain your distance, keep the bubble, all of these lovely things. There's an idea of the coach layout there on the right-hand side, which just gives an idea of where people can and can't sit. And this has to be, a lot of the cruise lines send us through their coach layout. So some of them differ. They will have like all of the seats on one side with doubles, and then the other side just singles. So again, one cruise line wants that and the next cruise line wants that. Seats that can't be used have to have those seat out of use signs on them. So there's a lot to it. After the tour, then we ask the guests to offload the coach from the front to the back, so we don't have the guests at the back of the coach walking past and queuing to get off while standing beside people still seated. avoid shaking hands or any physical contact, and remind the guests to sanitize their hands as they debark. So there's another sanitization unit just as they debark the coach. And obviously a very important piece of information there. If any guest on the tour indicates that they feel unwell, we need to separate them from the group and contact somebody at the pier when we will arrange to get that guest back based on whatever the cruise line protocol is. And the tour process, this is the same kind of as normal in that they gather them on board, but obviously because they can't have these huge groups of people congregating on board, it's a much slower process. They do still allocate the coaches, but they bring them down coach by coach. So like sometimes, like for example, yesterday with Celebrity, our tour dispatch was literally the whole morning because it was one coach every 15 minutes. And that's what they wanted as a result of their first call there last week. So they changed everything and it was one coach every 15 minutes. So literally dispatch was from like 7:30 until about 12:30 yesterday afternoon, but that's okay in order for us to be able to operate in a safe way. Again, the tour process, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but it's again, just constantly reminding the guests to sanitize their hands as soon as they get back on, as they're getting off. Keep the bubble. That's so important. They must be kept together at all times. This includes any kind of indoor activities. If they're visiting a museum, they can't wander off by themselves. We have to keep them in a bubble. Again, it's like going back to your childhood. If they need to use the restroom, theoretically, we're all supposed to go together and wait. Not ideal, but unfortunately, that's what the cruise lines are asking of us, and we need to listen to them. Again, pub and restaurant venues, where if we are using them, we have to, some of the cruise lines are requiring that we send through lateral flow test results that morning of any staff that may be serving them. And we've had to fill out complete sanitization forms for these venues. A operate safe certificate has to be sent to the cruise line. So there's a lot to it. Where we can, we try to request private rooms or areas for our groups so that they're away from the public, because obviously in Northern Ireland, you know, they are allowed inside to dine. Again, we ask people to respect the rules and regulations set out, and you know, it's in their best interest, because doing this and abiding by these rules allows us to continue to operate in a safe way, so these people can have a vacation and our staff can get back to work. So as I said, we do the rapid antigen test and the lateral flow test, and that's required by most of the cruise lines in advance of arrival at the port. And also, just to remind people, I think someone said one thing that we're obviously famous for is our welcome and our smile and how we carry out this tours. And you know what, it's quite difficult at the moment, because we feel like we're stuck to this protocol. The guides have to read out this list of protocols at the start of a tour, but we're trying to get people that, you know, like are in charge of their special day in Belfast to remember, like, welcome the guests with a smile still. We can still do that. Make sure they enjoy the tour and just take great pride in showing off Belfast, and, you know, show how much you enjoy your job and you love your work. That's still so important, because it can become very clinical, and we need to find the balance between making sure we do it right, as in we follow all procedures so that there are no issues, but also that the guests feel, well, I'm still going to enjoy it. I'm on holiday at the end of the day. So it's just finding the fine line. And then just, we look forward to being back in Cove next year, like Excursions Ireland. As I say, this presentation was really just to focus on all of the groundwork that we have done to get crews back into Belfast and Northern Ireland safe. I mean, it's been a huge effort between ourselves and, you know, the other tour operators, the ports, public health, port health. There's been a huge amount of background work that has gone into it. You know, we would like to think that a lot of these restrictions will be lifted before the return to Cove next year. Obviously not a mind reader, but we would be very, very hopeful. There will obviously be a lot of it still in place, maybe masks, maybe sanitization, probably smaller numbers on ships, but we would like to think that if we have all of our population more or less vaccinated, 80% or above, that there will be the chance for the guests to go ashore independently, which is what we all want as well. We can't wait to get back. I know we had done a lot of work in the background and trying to bring Cove more into the day, and trying to get the guides, I suppose, to promote Cove more. And we were very much discussing with Joanna and Lee, like, ways to do this, and we're open to more suggestions. at the end of the day, the most important thing is that the guests enjoy Cove and Cork and the surrounding areas, because that's why the ships will come back. So I think you guys do a great job of communicating. I think we need to do that, bring ourselves and Margaret and Cronin's and just bring us all together, and, you know, let's help each other. Always open to hearing ways that we can improve and how we can help you all locally, and very appreciative of all the support to date. So yeah, look, fingers crossed 2022 will have us back down that road from Dublin to Cork, and we'll see you all there next year with any luck at all.
Thank you, Niamh. My word, I'm exhausted listening to all the work that you've put into ensuring that all the passengers, the crew, the visitors, the ports are going to be safe when the cruise industry comes back. So well done on you. And I can see you have such an enormous passion for your job. So thank you. So we're going to go over to a more local level, and I'm going to introduce you to Jackie Coakley. Jackie is a Cove native and works as a cruise travel agent. She joined Cove Tourism in 2018 and is now on the board of directors. So over to you, Jackie.
Thanks, Joanna, and thank you to everyone for joining us this morning. Just to give you a little background about Cove Tourism and who we are and what we do for the cruise passengers that come into Cove. So Cove Tourism is made up of a board of directors with currently 11 members. We became an independent tourism body in 2004 with the help and support from Cove and Harbour Chamber and Cove Town Council at the time. Our principal activity is the promotion of tourism in Cove and the organisation of events to complement this. We run a website, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram page. The most important thing, I suppose, is that we're all volunteers. We do it because we love our town. So the next slide. So one of the big things that we started in 2011, we set up the Tourism Ambassador Programme, where local volunteers meet and greet passengers from the ships. They put on these lovely green vests or shirts, and they go around, they stand around the port area around the town, and they basically help the cruise passengers who come off the ship with their local knowledge and assist with advice. And it's been a huge success. It's very popular. The next slide. So this is the map of Cove, which we've produced a number of years back. We've produced over 5,000 copies, and we give the cruise ambassadors hand these out to the tourists. They're also in the tourist information office, but it's great to see the important points around Cove and some of the businesses. And so it's a lovely, clear map so people can know where they are. And the next slide, please. I don't know, have I frozen here, but anyway, so basically we organise live music events in Promenade. We organise performances like Irish dancers, and we work along other organisations in the town like the Cove Summer Swing, which is very popular when the big liners arrive. The most important thing about these events as well, it's not just about the cruise passengers, it's about attracting domestic tourism. A lot of people come to see the ships. You know, they book into the hotels, they make a weekend of it. So it also brings a lot of people from the city down to see the big ships on the day. The band recitals, we organise the Cove Confraternity Band to send a farewell to the ships when they leave. And this is sponsored by Port of Cork, and it's always a lovely farewell to the passengers. The next slide, please. So this is just showing about the happy passengers and how they love to see the music on the quayside. One of our most popular events is Australia Day, which it was the brainchild of Cove Tourism. It's basically for the 1,500 Australian passengers that come off the ship off their world cruise, and it has been a huge success, gained loads of media coverage. And this is just a quote from a cruise director on board from a few years ago that he sent to us, thanking us basically because all the passengers absolutely loved it. So it's really popular, and it's something that we'd like to build on, maybe other themed days to coincide with the cruise ships in the future. So if you go on to the next slide, Lee, thanks. So this is just the fun day, just to show people. And again, it shows that it's a family day out. It's lots of fun and very popular with not just cruise passengers. And this is just saying goodbye from Cove, which are great pictures that were taken on board as well, just to see the crowds that it actually attracts. So it's also about working with local organisations in the town. Cove Tidy Towns is really important to us. I think everybody knows what they do. It's just fantastic. And they, you know, working with these groups to make the town more attractive to visitors. And, you know, it's just fantastic what they do. The next slide is Cove Animation Team. Again, the cruise passengers absolutely love them. They love taking photographs. They're really, really popular. And you look, we just hope that by next year, as Niamh was saying, by April, that this will be a possibility again, that people will be able to get off the ship. I know there might be smaller numbers. We don't know the way things are going, but I'm just bringing a positive aspect on it, that this will come back, that we'll be able to, you know, have all these things, that Cove Animation Team will be able to meet and greet the passengers and take photographs. It's just a great, their pictures are all over the world. They've literally gone global with their pictures. We also obviously work with Cove Harbour Chamber and the tourist office, and it's great. I think kudos to Joanna. The last 12 months we've really worked together. We've created, she has come up with the idea of Team Cove. We've worked on a lot of projects during the summer, and it's just great to have us all now working together as one. So I just wanted to mention them. And of course our maps are in the tourist office as well, and the girls in there are great. If you go on to the next slide, so please. Sorry guys, I think my screen is freezing. So last year during the pandemic, we worked on a promotional video for Cove, and we got 2 local lads, Island Media, to create this lovely video. It was basically for the to promote Cove during the pandemic for the local businesses, but it's just something we'd love to work on in the future, maybe to work on promotion videos that we can put on the ships or sent to the cruise line. So this is just, I wanted to mention this as well. So it was fantastic, got great reach all over the world, and lots of comments under the video from former cruise passengers. So this is our future goals for Cove Tourism. We'd love to have local connections, offer unique local experience guided tours. Again, Niamh mentioned that. Something like a behind the scenes in Cove Cathedral, a pub crawl. Again, I'm talking as if COVID doesn't exist, but it's not that COVID doesn't exist, but you know, this will be down the line in the future. Connect with cruise lines and ensure correct information is given about Cove and surrounding areas. This is one of my big things, because I've often been on ships, as you know myself. I bring people on the ships, and some of the information is incorrect or hasn't been given, you know, fully. So I just want to make sure, we just want to make sure that the correct information about Cove, about Cork City, about the surrounding areas is correct, and people know where they are when they come into Cove. We'd love to get a possibility of tourist information kiosk at the port, and I saw that Conor was mentioning that that could be a possibility. So it'd be great that we could have local people there to hand out the maps and give information, train times and whatever. Engage with excursion companies, tour guides, and show them what Cove has to offer. And last year we did bring Niamh's company Excursions Ireland on a tour of Cove, showed them the cathedral, brought them to Spike, showed them the Titanic Museum, and just spoke to the guides. And again, as Niamh mentioned, it's just about getting the tour guides to mention Cove when they're on the buses coming back from their kissing their Blarney Stone, going to the Cork, the markets or whatever. It's not that we understand the cruise ships do, of course, want to do the main tours that people, I cruise myself, and I know I want to go to, you know, Pompeii, and when I go to Naples or whatever. So it's not about grabbing all the cruise passengers, is just so that they know that Cove is there, and it'd be nice to even walk around for an hour after their excursion. So we will be working closely with Niamh and Excursions Ireland. More funding is a big thing with us. Obviously all this costs money, and it'd be great to get maybe a cruise dividend for the passengers that come into Cove, or from the cruise lines, or however it works. So that's just something we look at in the future as well. And just the last slide, it's just basically, it's great have this opportunity to work with all these people from Port of Cork, Cork Harbour Chamber. Sorry, well, I forgot about this slide. So the Welcome Back campaign is what we want for 22. We want to celebrate the ships coming back to our shores. And we want to have a party effect. So hopefully, if it happens, if we aren't restricted, we'll make sure that the ships are welcome back to Cove. And thanks for the opportunity. We all want to work together, and I've gone well over my 8 minutes, so I have to go. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Great to get a local focus on what's going on in Cove Tourism, and we're delighted to partner up with you really on the ground, especially in the tourist office, which is also based in our office, Cove and Harbour Chamber. So now we're going to go to our final speaker of the day. We're delighted to have Seamus Heaney speak. He was at our February business breakfast meeting, which was hugely popular, I have to say, and great to have him back here today for today's event. So Seamus Heaney is head of Visit Cork. It comes from the hospitality background, having trained as a hotelier. He has over 30 years experience in developing tourism in Ireland. So over to you now, Seamus.
Thanks, Joanna. Good morning, everybody. Can you just give me the thumbs up if you can see the screen? Yeah, perfect, thanks. So I'm just going to go quickly through it. I suppose I always just have to start off and just give an idea of our background, who we are. Visit Cork is a company that's been set up to promote tourism within the city and county of Cork without borders and without barriers. One of the big ones I suppose we'd have always been doing for about the last 11 years was promoting conference business and incentive business into Cork through the Cork Convention Bureau. And then in recent years, in 2016, there was a unified brand sought for Cork as a whole, and that became the Pure Cork brand. Again, just all of these people at the bottom of the screen are those that are involved in promoting tourism or funding tourism in Cork. So just we go back to the last 2 years and how things have changed within tourism. But it's particularly in the last few weeks, we saw the reopening of the hospitality industry. Great to see some of the hotels back open, restaurants, even though it's outdoor dining. And I suppose part of our role has been involved in that stage process and working with both the Tourism Ireland and Fáilte Ireland on the ground to make sure we can do that in a safe manner. And again, I just highlight this, the Fáilte Ireland Safety Charter. This is important now because we have domestic tourists, but I think once we have a re-emergence of international visitors, this is going to be far more important, and that branding is going to be far more important. And it's just to make sure that every business that's involved in tourism in any way have done the charter and that they carry the badge of approval. So just the Pure Cork Welcomes campaign, we've been working on this. It's been start-stop, as we all know, for the last 12 months. It starts, it stops, we've changed levels, but we've been there with a campaign, I suppose, running in digital. And a lot of our resources go into digital, and then we work with Fáilte Ireland to make sure the Discovering campaign highlights the best of what Cork has to offer. The biggest challenge, I suppose, once we reopened the hotel industry has been the city's been challenged. Parts of North Cork have been challenged, and then West Cork has been doing very well. But again, all that will change come September if we don't have international visitors back, because the domestic tourist people are back to school, and there'll be less domestic tourists on the ground. Again, as I said, we've been very involved with the campaigns, and that's very much part of what we've been doing for the last couple of months, as well as doing our own small digital stuff as well. So with Tourism Ireland, as I said, we keep the lights on internationally with Tourism Ireland. And there's a question I saw came up: what has been done to promote Cork or Cove to the tourism the internationally for cruise tourism? And I suppose that's where we come in. We're all the time trying to feed into information to Tourism Ireland, and they have a huge reach internationally, as we all know. So we've been very fortunate that we've had 3 different updates to Tourism Ireland on what changes have been made for Cork. And one of the things then is we just did the highlight video. We highlighted a video to sort of welcome visitors back. We were hoping that international markets would be well open by now. But anyway, unfortunately, as markets open in those countries, Tourism Ireland are willing to put out this video on our behalf. again, you can just see that I suppose our role there is just trying to make sure that the lights are left on internationally and that people still know that Cork is there when the time is right to travel again. So again, the outdoor dining became very big in Ireland in the last 12 months, long overdue. So again, just on purecork.ie, we're making sure the site is relevant. That's the Bible for tourism within Cork, and we just need to make sure that's updated on a regular basis. And we've outsourced that to a local company here in Cork, just to make sure it's all updated. And the outdoor seating has become a very big part of that as well. Just again, I just urge you at any time to make sure you go on to purecork.ie, just to make sure any of the listings are all correct. And if they're not, we can update stuff very quickly on it. So we worked again with Fáilte Ireland on a digital brochure for West Cork, which will include maps, itineraries, things to do, places to eat and places to stay. And that has worked exceptionally well. It was completed at the end of May, early June, and was launched sometime in June. But we're equally now working with the team in Fáilte Ireland again on to do one for the city and out into Cove. So that's the Ireland's Ancient East one. We're working on that, and that should be finished in the next few weeks. We're just gathering some of the imagery and new videos for that. And again, because it's a digital publication as opposed to a printed publication, it's dynamic and stuff can change in it at any minute of the day. So if there's any changes to properties, we can update that very quickly. Huge amount of work gone into that, but very visitor focused. And again, once the cruise industry does return, this will be a very important tool. You know, they can just QR code it and it goes onto their phone or inside a lot of the properties. A lot of the hotels in West Cork at the moment have access to the digital brochure. So that's some of the stuff we've been working on, and we've updated a lot of our maps into different languages, so that all that work has been done. So again, Michael mentioned about the whole sustainability. It's important, but it's becoming more important now as we return to full visitor numbers. And we've been working with the GDSI, which is the Global Sustainability Index, for the last number of years. We started in about 2018, and Cork's rankings went way up in 2021. The figures aren't published because of COVID, but again, we'll be working on our 2022 submission very shortly, and we're encouraging a lot more of our industry partners, i.e. hotels, venues, to become much more involved in that space of sustainability, because it is becoming far, far more important, as is the whole smart tourism side of it. And you can see again, Cork went up the rankings in 2021. 2020 we started growing, and in 2021 we grew even stronger. We were the lowest in 2018 in Ireland, and we were the highest in 2021. So again, as I said, we've been working on the European Capital of Smart Tourism, which we think is going to be very important, the whole accessibility side of it, how we integrate with people, how we work with the whole technology side of it, the culture side of it, and also on the, as I mentioned, on sustainability. So we did hold a seminar last February. We got all the partners together, and we're hoping to make an application for a European Capital Smart Tourism Award in 2022. We think it's going to be a long process, but it's great to get partners involved in it, getting all the hotels singing from the same hymn sheet, and that, you know, and to get the city and county councils all very much involved in it. So that's an ongoing piece of work that we're doing on it. So I suppose the good news, the positive news, is a lot of the trade portals are back open, so we can now apply to attend international workshops. Although at the moment they're virtual, and they're very time consuming, they're very hard to do. You're not meeting people face to face, as we all know. We're Irish people, as Niamh said earlier on, and we want to meet people and we want to welcome people. So doing it virtually isn't always the answer, but to be able to meet people again face to face and tell them what Cork has to offer. So hopefully these will all get better as time goes on. But at the moment the portals are open, and Cork is going to try and be there. And Cove features very, very high on our agenda when we're promoting tourism, and any aspect of tourism. So again, we've been offered a place at IBTM in Barcelona, which, you know, in November. But again, that's subject to final approval from the Department of Tourism and Fáilte Ireland, and we're waiting for that. So again, just some of the conference business. We always thought was going to go, this hybrid model was talked about for a long time, and then we'll go fully virtual. But I suppose the good news is that there are people making bids out there, looking looking for help with bids. We actually have 2 bids to be in by the end of today. 2 international bids. One of them is 600-person conference, another is a 250-person conference. But they are there, and as Michael McCarthy said, I think earlier on, or Conor, that again it's going to be maybe smaller numbers, and then you'll have the bit of the hybrid model where now Cork can apply for a conference for 2,000 people, where maybe 1,200 are online and 800 people come to visit. But our priority is to make sure we get people to come and see the destination for itself. So that's some of the stuff that we've been bidding for, and then we've stuff in pending phase at the moment. So that's a whirlwind for me very quickly. I know it's not directly talking about the whole cruise industry, but I suppose it's just an overview of what we're trying to do to keep the lights on internationally for Cork when the time is right for people to travel again. That's it.
Thank you so much, Seamus. The Cove and Harbour Chamber have been working very closely actually with Port of Cork over the last 12 months. So Seamus, it's really good to have you on board and have you involved in Cove. And my word, there's so much to offer in the whole region. To try and get that in one day is an awful lot. So thank you. And it's great that you're here with us this morning. And it's also great that Cove is, I suppose, the first and last port of call for the ship. So delighted with that. So look, we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to kind of get maybe 1 or 2 questions in, if you don't mind. So Colin McDonough had a question there of how Cove is going to be promoted on the cruise line ships itself. So maybe, Niamh, if I could hand that question over to you.
Yeah, so basically I know we've had this discussion before. So I suppose first of all, we have discussed this with the cruise lines before, and we're happy to send on any collateral, be it video footage or even printed materials that we can send to the head office, who in turn can send it to the ships, so that it's there on board before the ship arrives in Cove. We're also happy to take on any kind of literature onto the coaches so that it's on the seats before they go out. Obviously, this is all, you know, if everything is normal and we're allowed to put printed material on the coaches, put it on the coaches. So whether you guys are going to come up with a new brochure that promotes all your various offerings in Cove and the area, we're happy to distribute that in our coaches. Also to give you a list of the times the tours are coming back at lunchtime, to see if you can maybe grab some of those guests to invite them up for lunch or entertainment or whatever it is. So look, we're 100%, and I know we had kind of I know Jackie had mentioned about the team being down in 2019, so we had kind of put a lot more work into that, and we'd like to just pick that up again for the 22 season and see what we can do, because we're very anxious, and I know I've said it before, it's very important. Like the tours are a great part of the call, don't get me wrong, and if they're making money, it's great, but ultimately the overall experience and how the port rates is why a ship will return to a region. So it's in our best interest if the independent guests go up and they love Cove. It's in our best interest, it's in the port's best interest, in everybody's best interest. So we're eager to work alongside the independent operators and the locals to see how we can get those people up in order to continue with the high ratings that Cove have now and improve them. So absolutely, bring it on. It's a fresh start. So, you know, let's all put the heads together and see what we can come up with.
And Niamh, you're right. We've actually, I suppose, we've been in discussions of how we can promote Cove, even from the deep water quay itself when the passengers get off the ship. So we're going to endeavour to do that. And I'm like, Colin would be very involved with the Chamber as well. So, and between Cove Tourism and the Cove Chamber, we can do that. Another question, I suppose, that would be very important is that now that the Port of Cork aren't, the cruise ships aren't going into the Port of Cork, we have the opportunity here in Cove, I suppose, that the ships could stay overnight. Do you think that's a runner? Or would that be more for Conor to answer? Or
Conor can definitely answer from the port side, but from our side, absolutely. And we have discussed this previously with Mick, Conor, and Sarah, that, you know, whether it's the use of a train up to Dublin for those guests who want to still see Dublin, or coaches, or whichever, that's definitely a possibility. And I know, as I say, Conor will speak more, but we have put that. We made a trip out to the US, myself, Conor, and Belfast at the time, to discuss this with them, that look, just because Dublin Port don't necessarily want or have space for the business, doesn't mean the rest of the country doesn't want to, you know, and we still want to give people the opportunity to see the capital if they do want to see it, because ultimately it is the capital, whether you like it or not, as a dub. But you know what I mean, like it is, so people will want to see it, but at least they have the opportunity. If they don't want to see it, they stay in Cork and the surrounding areas of Cove or wherever for 2 days. They have the best of both worlds. So Conor will speak more about the logistics of it.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Niamh. I think maybe just to add some value to what Niamh said, or very little value, but Niamh and I did, and it goes to the core of some of the questions that have come up. And Niamh and I did travel to the States in 2018 in the wake of Dublin's shock announcement of pulling out of Cruise Ireland and reducing their presence in cruise. And we travelled around the States with colleagues from Belfast and the main agents to figure out how Ireland could still be a successful destination in a kind of post-Dublin landscape, actually. And we put a lot of effort into that and have done since then. It was quite difficult to do so, particularly for Niamh and I, who are obviously from Dublin, trying to explain why the capital city wasn't welcoming such an important city. But I do think now, despite Dublin's move, there is a huge opportunity for both Belfast and for us, more importantly, for Cork and for Cove, to change our approach a little bit, to enhance our offering, not just a destination port, but maybe a turnaround port of a certain nature, and also to be able to offer a link to Dublin and the overnights. And I definitely think there's an opportunity there, and the Port of Cork will certainly be flexible in that. That's definitely an area we're going to pursue, and we'll do that in conjunction and support with Niamh and her colleagues, and indeed the other agents.
That's great, yeah, because even having the train station on the doorstep here in Cove, that the people can get off the cruise ship and literally go up to Kent Station, go up to Dublin, and especially if they're here overnight and maybe even for 2 nights. So it's something that we can definitely kind of look into. And Mick, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on the subject, if you don't mind. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted there. I talked by the thing. No, it is because it ticks so many boxes. Because look, you know, to bring a cruise ship from Cove, let's say, to Dublin is a huge cost in fuel, double port charges. So it was a very, very attractive proposition we were developing many years ago, as Niamh said, that we were looking at the train from Cove to Dublin, you know, with passengers, maybe 400 or 500 people going to Dublin on a train, spending the day in Dublin, getting the train back down in the evening. Following day, 400 or 500 more people would do it. That would then free up the people on the ship to spend the day in Cove or Cork in the region on alternative days. The cruise lines were particularly Princess Cruises, because for them there was a saving. They would, obviously the passengers would pay for their train. It was, as you know, we had costed with Andrew Roach at the time at somewhere in the region of about €125 for a return trip, including the pickup in Dublin and, let's say, to the Guinness store. One other thing that I think that should be kept in mind is that about 50 to 60% of the passengers used to go on organized tours from Cove. In 1 year, I think it was 2016, Irish Rail carried 40,000 people on the train from Cove to Cork. That was their figure. So that was 40,000 people out of 100,000 people that went into Cork and do it themselves. Those people came off the train, spent the afternoon in Cove, you know, or spent the morning in Cove, got the train. So it is a huge spin-off for Cove and the region, the cruise industry, and that should not be forgotten.
Great, thank you so much. So look, guys, we've run out of time. So any questions you have, just email them into the Chamber office and we'll relay them then to the speakers on your behalf, and we'll get the answers out to you. So that's it for our July workshop on the cruise industry. Thank you so much for all of you joining us this morning. Thank you to Kim in the office and the Chamber team, our Chamber Council, Lee at Lee Gillen Events for producing and coordinating this morning's event, to the Port of Cork for their continued support and sponsorship, and of course to our fantastic speakers again. So our next event is on Friday the 3rd of September and will be a networking event over in Spike Island. So it's going to be on a Friday afternoon around 4:30, and it's going to be great crack. And we'll have a great chance to kind of meet everybody physically for the first time in a long time. We will also have our September business breakfast meeting, which again is sponsored by the Port of Cork, and it's on the 10th of September, which will feature Seamus Fives, who's the site leader at Pfizer's, plus many more events where we've got a huge itinerary right up to May of next year, so which will all be on our website and our social media channels. So look, thank you everybody and have a great day. Good morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Bye.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna.
Good to see you, Michael.
How you doing, Kieran?
Hanging in there.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye, Dominic.
Bye-bye, everyone. See you soon, Michael.
Take care. Take care.